Come on, let it play. Let it play. Up 3-1. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back into the Celtics Talk Weekly Post Game Show. I am your host, Rob Hayden. Joined with me is my co-host, Zach, aka the Celtics fan page. The Boston Celtics take a 3-1 series lead over the Cleveland Cavaliers tonight with a win on the road. The Celtics are now 4-0 on the road in this postseason run so far, 109-102. Jason Tatum led the way with yet another 33-point performance. 11 rebounds, 5 assists, almost an identical stat line to his Game 3 performance. And then obviously Jaylen Brown helped out with 28 points and 8 rebounds. Zach, you kind of know the deal here. It wasn't the prettiest of wins. However, any playoff win is something that you should be excited about. Celtics obviously taking the 3-1 series lead. Your initial thoughts, reactions, and takeaways for the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think just if you're box score watching, you'll probably say the Celtics didn't play a great game because they only won by 7 without Donovan Mitchell playing. But honestly, I thought they played well. I thought Cleveland was really good. They played overall a really good game, but I think especially in that first half, they were really good. I think they shot well over 50% from 3 in the first half. I think it was 53%. That kept them close. And then I thought Garland played well towards the end of the game. I thought Mobley played well. So, yeah, I think I was more impressed with Cleveland and the way they were able to sort of, there were times where I think we were up 15 at one point and they just never went away. So I think I was impressed mostly with how they responded to not having Donovan Mitchell and just didn't give up. But overall, I didn't think the Celtics played a bad game at all. I thought Tatum got going and got the shots he needed to, which is something that we've been looking for all postseason long. I believe it's back-to-back 30-point games for him.
Correct.
And then 30, 10, and 5. Can't really ask for more out of him. Efficiency could be better, but I'll take 30, 10, and 5 any day. Again, a really high efficiency night out of Jaylen. He's been absolutely unbelievable. I think the only thing lacking, obviously, with Porzingis out is just Al Horford. Right. It's painful. It's painful. Yeah, Al Horford play basketball right now. I don't know what the shooting percentages was, but it wasn't good. I don't think he made a 3. I don't know how many he took. It felt like a lot. He felt like he took a lot of 3s. I don't believe he made one. It's not fun watching Al Horford play basketball right now.
Right.
Overall, I thought it was a good effort. Tough to win on the road, and always nice to win with LeBron watching you.
Right. 3 for 9 from Al from the floor, 0 of 4 from downtown. Could not get it going. D. White as well, 1 of 6 from the floor, 1 of 4 from behind the arc. However, that is why, and that is what is so unique about this Celtics team, is that 2 of your 5 starters can have games like this, and you can still walk away with 3 very solid performances out of, 3 of your top 5 players, top 6 players. I agree with the point you made. I think, if you're box score watching, it's easy to say that Boston played down tonight. I don't think that was the case in Game 4. I think Cleveland played up. Like you said, there was a lot of times where the Celtics had that lead extended to 15. It wasn't necessarily that the Celtics were doing too many things wrong. It was more so that the Cleveland Cavaliers were throwing their last-ditch effort, last knockout punch kind of to keep their season kind of alive, because obviously they're going back to Boston down 3-1, and we kind of similar story to what happened in Miami. So I don't think that Boston kind of walked in tonight expecting to win. I think their intensity was up. I think their intentions were all good. I think defensively, when you held them to 102 points, the defensive side of the ball is still, definitely there. But I think what's been the difference has been Jrue Holiday. And I mean, we got to talk about Jrue tonight. It was like his second game in a row from Jrue where he is just doing everything right. I mean, you couldn't find a knock on his game tonight. 16.7 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals and a block for Jrue tonight in 42 minutes. He looked gassed there with about 8 minutes left to go in that fourth quarter when Joe called that timeout. He was noticeably tired. For you, Zach, I mean, how important do you think that's been, the Jrue Holiday kind of aspect of it, that we've kind of been seeing this elevated version of Jrue these past couple games in the series?
Yeah, I mean, this is what they traded Jrue for. I mean, he's not going to be the star on any given night. He's probably never going to lead the team in points, but when it's playoff time, he has a championship already. He knows what it takes to win a championship. not just vocally, but he knows what it takes on the court, what you have to do to win, going into Cleveland in a road rowdy atmosphere and putting up, I don't remember the exact points he said, but 6 for 11 shooting,
Right.
playing the way he did, especially defensively. I thought he was really good as well. And when, Derek White does have that off night, which he's now had twice in a row, Drew has stepped up. And as long as one of them has it going, they'll be fine.
Right.
First 2 games it was White, and now it's Drew.
Right. That beat me to the punch. That's kind of like the unique thing about this backcourt, where it's, obviously you don't want to see Derek White shoot 1 of 6 ever. Yeah. But this team is very dynamic and can get you from a lot of different ways. So, Drew is, like you said, he's a guy he's got a ring. He's multiple playoff runs, a lot of good games played. For, obviously the Pelicans, he had that little series against Dame that he played pretty well in, and then the championship run with Milwaukee. And then he's given the Celtics, a bunch of problems in that playoff series 2 years ago. So I do think that the thing with Drew is like, he's so composed all the time, where it's like, it's so noticeable that the team calms down when the ball's in Drew Holiday's hands, doesn't make too many mistakes. And defensively, he had it going tonight. He kind of showed you the caliber of defensive player that we kind of expected to see. It's been iffy up and down at times. I thought there were a couple possessions again in that fourth quarter where he got lucky and bailed out that the Cavs missed, and he just couldn't get to close out. Again, he played 42 minutes. I don't remember. I don't have a stat on this, and this is just a shot in the dark, but this may be the first game, or I can count on one hand, that Holiday's played 40-plus minutes this year. I mean, he hardly ever is getting up there. Between the blowout or really just the depth of a rotation we had in the regular season, we didn't really have many guys playing 40 a night. So, like, again, it was noticeable. It's fine. That's going to happen in the playoffs. You're going to kind of get your legs taken under you. But, I do want to talk about Jason Tatum next, because it kind of feels like the shooting-wise, efficiency-wise, he's not quite there yet. However, it's like Boston is making a point to get him involved and get him going.
Mm-hmm. Just going back to that briefly, he played 44 against Detroit. That was an overtime game, though. And he played 41 in Minnesota. So those are the only 2 other times he's played that many minutes. And
those are both OT games. Both of those, right? That Minnesota one, too.
Yes, the Minnesota game was an overtime game in Minnesota. That's correct. But yeah, I think going back to Tatum, what we've all looked for is for him to create his own shot. And I think what I've noticed over the last 2 games is he's like, when he gets to the rim, he's doing it so physically that it's like, it's not something I've seen him do before. But when he just decides, like, okay, I'm just getting to the rim, he's doing it in a much more physical manner than at least I'm used to. And that's something I've been really impressed with, is he's just bullying people. He's pushing people off him. He's getting to the rim. I think that's a progression that we haven't seen yet. And it's obviously a welcome progression from him.
And I do think that it's like, a guy with like Jason Tatum, and you hear the Celtics players say it all the time. I feel like he's the last guy I'm worried about. Mm-hmm. Because he's not going to do this all postseason shooting wise. I mean, he has still pieced together some great games without scoring the ball, which I think is the evolution of Jason Tatum. But I would be shocked, and hopefully this doesn't age poorly, but I would be shocked if we went through a whole postseason run and Tatum finishes shooting 40 from the floor and 25 from behind the arc, right? Those numbers are going to get up, whether it's into the low 30s or into the high 40s, they're going to eventually get up. He's going to get hot eventually. So I think for Tatum, my biggest thing with him is just making sure that he's staying in rhythm, that, not always a rhythm doesn't mean you're always making the shot, but it's you're getting your rhythm jump shots. And I think in the first 6 games of this, postseason run, it was so team oriented, and it was so focused on, White's hot, and you got Porzingis, who's kind of got a hot hand here and there, and you got all these guys who were shooting these crazy high efficiency numbers, that Tatum was kind of taking a step back and being kind of the distributor on the offensive side of the ball. But in reality, yes, that's nice, but that's just the icing on the cake with Jason Tatum, right? That's not what you're actually looking for. So if he keeps, I want to see him shooting over 20 shots a game in the playoffs. I mean, it's Jason Tatum. You have to, you're paying him all that money, and, he's too well decorated in the postseason.
Especially without Porzingis playing.
Right, exactly. Where it's like, he really has to step up, and he has in these past 2 games on the road. And how about this, Zach, tonight? Here's a little stat for you. Ian's not on, so I got to be the stat guy. Jason Tatum has passed Michael Jordan for the most points in his first 7 career playoff appearances.
Jesus. Well, I mean, I think it helps when you go to the Eastern Conference Finals 5 or 6 times already.
Right.
5 times, I think. And then this year, hopefully, will be a 6th. But yeah, I mean, deep playoff runs help. He's obviously been – I don't think he gets the nod as a playoff riser. I like to think he's a playoff riser.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, from Tatum, I think one of the things that people forget is like, especially the Miami series when he really didn't do anything, they didn't need him to really do anything for them to win the. And so I think it's fine when he's taking back series, even in this Cleveland series. They don't need him to take over when you're playing a Cavs team, especially time without Donovan Mitchell. But when you get into the Eastern Conference Finals and the NBA Finals, there will be times where Tatum is going to need to take over, and I think he will do it. There's just hasn't been really a time. I think they said on the broadcast, this is the first game the Celtics have played this postseason that was decided by single digits.
Right. So, and it's like that's what's so important, I feel like, with keeping him in rhythm. It's so that when you do need him, he's ready to go. And he's not like, going on the fly and adjusting in the Eastern Conference Finals or the NBA Finals, however far we do get. You'd figure up 3-1. Obviously, you got to get the job done Wednesday night, but you'd figure eventually, whether it's 5, 6, or 7, we will get there. But I agree, I completely. Tatum, I would classify as a playoff riser. And also something I do want to mention is that if you look at the coverages that teams are playing on Jason Tatum, it's like the Giannis wall. You know how like teams wall off on Giannis? They put 3, the man, and then the 2 guys next to him that are just like, that's what teams are doing now to Tatum. And it kind of feels like, I think he's done a phenomenal job at realizing and understanding when to give the ball up. And tonight we saw it. He had an opportunity to go at the rim when the Celtics were up 5 with about, 40 seconds left in the game. He swung that ball right out to Jaylen Brown, who got an open catch and shoot step in 3. And those are the progressions of Tatum. So yes, I think it is easy to look at box score watch, look at the numbers and say, oh, Tatum is, having a down year. But I think when you look at his usage, 19th in the NBA. I haven't seen the updated game 4 usage log, but 19th in these playoffs and usage behind guys like TJ McConnell. So, it really is like, all right, simmer down a little bit. But someone who is 7th on that usage list is Jaylen Brown. And these past 2 games, you've seen these crazy high efficiency performances from JB in a lot less time with the ball in his hands. And tonight he was phenomenal yet again. 27 points, 8 rebounds. He tacked on 1 assist, 9 of 15 from the floor, 2 of 3 from behind the arc. He did have 5 turnovers, but again, it hasn't been a real, occurring problem. So I'm not too worried about the turnover numbers. It happens from time to time with him. But I feel like with JB, this is, and I'm interested to hear what you think, this is the best type of role for Jaylen Brown, is when he is getting the ball in his spots and he doesn't have to go one-on-one isolation the entire game.
Yeah. Honestly, this is the best basketball I think we've ever seen Jaylen Brown play. He's composed. Right. He's under control, driving to the rim. He's finishing in all different types of ways. He's knocking down his threes. But also add, Jaylen isn't shooting this well without Tatum. Right. Tatum is feeding him well, and the gravity that Tatum has is getting Jaylen these open looks. I think that is the same for anyone. I don't think Drew was 6 of 11 tonight if Tatum's not on the floor. And the same thing with basically everyone that plays on the Celtics. I think people underestimate the way Tatum is guarded just overall. And the amount of looks, even though his assist numbers are only 5 or 6 assists a game, right? The gravity that he has and the playmaking ability that he's developed over the last, honestly, 2 or 3 years has helped his teammates. And I think people don't recognize that as much as it should be. But back to Jaylen. Yeah, I think this is the best basketball we've watched Jaylen play. I think he worked really – he got a lot of criticism after the Celtics were eliminated last year, and I think he really put in the work. And I think we've kind of watched him flourish over the last, 80 or 90 some odd games. But yeah, best basketball we've seen Jaylen play, and hopefully it continues forward into the Eastern Conference Finals.
I mean, his numbers are just through the roof. He feels like he's doing everything correct on the offense end of the floor. Defensively too, he's been awesome. So I mean, JB has been absolutely huge. But something I do want to ask you is Game 5. Now, I asked Franco this after last game, the importance in Game 4 and winning Game 4. When you look kind of around the league, you see, obviously Minnesota and Denver are tied up 2-2. The Oklahoma City and Dallas game is currently in progress. Dallas is up 10 after 1. And then you have Indiana and New York, who kind of are like this in this looming 7-game series, it feels like, with that series going on. So you potentially have at least 2 of the 4, series that we have left with a looming 7 games. How important do you think it is for Boston to finish this off in Game 5 and get all the rest they can?
Yeah, I mean, it's super important. I think we've also seen just so many injuries across the league. And it seems like, honestly, at some points, I thought they weren't game-ending injuries, obviously, that we saw tonight. But Jalen got hit in the knee. Derek went down the tunnel for a little bit. So it just feels like the more you play, obviously, the more susceptible you are to those injuries. And it's always good to finish out a series as quickly as possible. I don't want to go back to Cleveland and have to win a Game 6. In Cleveland, even though we've been super good on the road, winning Game 5 at home, which will be on the 15th, guarantees a minimum 4 days rest. And I think that's huge. You get to stay at home, do all your stuff, figure it out. They've been pretty good this year about finishing off the Miami series. I expect them to finish off the Cleveland series in 5 and get that 4 days rest at minimum.
I agree with you. I feel like this year, this team, it feels a little bit different. This is last year. You're expecting going to Game 5, and you don't know. It's a toss-up. But I do think, one, they're not only responding, the Celtics aren't only trying to close out this series, they're responding from a Game 2 loss at home. Last time they stepped on the Garden floor, it was disappointment. And I do think that, they are looking to kind of finish these series at home in Boston. And quite frankly, Zach, I feel like this is how the playoffs are going to go for the Celtics in these next 2 rounds. If you kind of want my general overall, what I've gauged from these playoffs, it feels like a team will be good enough to beat Boston one time, but Boston is going to be either responding after a loss or just out-talenting you in the other 4 games. Now, obviously the West is a little bit more complicated, but in a series against the New York Knicks or the Indiana Pacers, it kind of feels like a team is going to grab a game that Boston could have won. They just kind of let it slip up, and then Boston's going to kind of lock back into, oh no, we can't let that happen. We have to, really focus in and lock in for the rest of the series. And it feels like they're going to finish them off. And I would be surprised if the Celtics don't play a series I'd be surprised if the Celtics play anything more than a 5-game series leading into the finals, because right now, when you look at the teams, their health, their legs, their talent, it just feels like they're good enough to get Boston once, and then Boston's going to finish the deal after that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know if I'd say 5. I think, with the health of New York right now, I'd probably say that's a 5 or 6 game series. I think 6 is the max. Right. I don't see anyone in the Eastern Conference at least taking it 7 games. But yeah, I don't think you'll really see the Celtics play any tough competition until the NBA Finals. And honestly, at this point, I feel like if this isn't the year for them, is there ever going to be a year for them? Right. It just seems like everything's lining up super well for them to at least make the NBA Finals. They'll have home court advantage in those finals. So yeah, it's do or die time for them at this point.
And you say home court advantage, and I got to ask you right now, Boston. They are 3-2 at home, 15-15 in the past 3 seasons at the TD Garden. Now, do you think that is at all concerning when you think about the Celtics moving forward in terms of the Eastern Conference Finals against a potential Knicks, or the NBA Finals against one of these 4 Western Conference teams that you kind of get a sense that they're much better than what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, you're definitely right about them being much better. I think either of those teams would, and you can pick any team from the West and they'd be the second best team in the East right now. But besides that, it's not worrying to me, because both times they lost, it felt like it was just absurd shooting from an opponent. I believe both of those times it was over 50% 3-point shooting.
Right.
I don't know what they can do to stop it. I mean, obviously the defense wasn't great, but I wouldn't be worried if a team's, and I believe NBA best 7-2 in the playoffs right now. So I'm not going to nitpick over home losses.
Right.
If they don't close out in game 5, I should say, then we can get worried about it.
Right. And I do think that, like, I'm going to be a lot more lenient right now in a game 2 loss. I know we're kind of reverting back to game 2 here. But a game 2 loss against Cleveland, because back in my mind, I know to myself, all right, that's not really something you're upset about. I think personally, and when you get to the NBA finals, it is crucial that you win at home, because you're setting yourself up as the 1 seed, where if you take care of business at home, you are going to be crowned NBA champion, you figure. However, I do think that, it'll ramp up a little bit for these guys. Again, I agree. Miami hit 22 threes in that game 2, which was a playoff franchise record. And then Cleveland shot over 50% from behind the arc, which was just absurd for a Cleveland team that you saw tonight kind of come out and just couldn't buy a bucket. So, I think moving forward, it's something to look at. Again, you highlight it. All right, game 2s, the first 2 games at home. How do the Celtics come out? What are their intentions? How do they look? But at the end of the day, is there any such thing as a bad playoff win? Because I think any win in the playoffs is a good win. Each game's different. So as for tonight goes, I think this was good for the Celtics to have a game where you're in a high pressure situation on the road and you had to make timely buckets. And that was something that we were worried about coming into this postseason, was how did the Celtics execute down the stretch? Tonight, I think they did a little too much sitting around and waiting in the last 3 minutes. I think they kind of went into all right, defense is our offense here for the final minutes of the game. I think Cleveland missed a lot of great looks, but at the end of the day, I think Brown hit that shot that really sealed the deal. And if, our players are going to hit that shot that does that, then I'm comfortable. But for you, what did you think of the Celtics late game execution tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I actually just want to go back to the home thing real quick.
Right.
I think we can nitpick with the Celtics, but we've watched Denver lose 2 games at home. And then on the flip side, we watched Minnesota then lose 2 games at home when they could have put themselves up 3-1 with just 1 win. So it's easy to nitpick. I mean, I know New York's undefeated at home right now. I believe Indiana's undefeated at home right now. So, I mean, obviously they could be better, but I'm not going to nitpick because they're just so good on the road. And that's just not New York hasn't won a road game yet, I believe, and neither has Indiana. So I'm not going to nitpick over. Actually, no, Indiana did win 1. But anyway, I'm not going to nitpick over the Celtics losing 2, as of right now, meaningless home playoff games. But yeah, I think going back to the late game, they still have the habit of playing a lot of isolation ball. I think there's a 12-0 or a 12-2 Cav run at one point in the last 3 or 4 minutes to cut it down. And it just feels like they get up 15 and then okay, we can kind of put it on cruise control. And that's when they start getting stagnant. I don't think it's necessarily the last 30 seconds or late game situations where they're stagnant. It's more the last 2 to 5 minutes when they have a sizable lead and they think they can mess around, where they stop playing team basketball. And there's times where it's one screen and then Tatum tries to go ISO on Evan Mobley or something, or Drew's playing pick and roll with Peyton Pritchard and he turns around and takes a free throw line jumper for some reason, which I think happened today. So yeah, I think there's room to continue the flow of the offense as it was the rest of the quarter in that 3 to 5 minute range when it's a 8 or 9 point lead and you think it's over, but it's not really over. You just have to keep playing your offense. And for some reason they don't do that, but obviously it'd be nice to see them take that 9 point lead, make it 13 or 14 with 2 minutes left and really put teams away.
Well, that's the play I was thinking of, is the Tatum isolation on Mobley. Now, Holiday got that rebound and Tatum was open down court.
Yes,
on the break. And I would have loved to see the Celtics push the ball, give the ball to Tatum, go up by 10 with 48 seconds left. Because instead what they did was they drained the clock, they got the Mobley switch, Tatum shot got tipped, shot clock violation. I remember Greg Anthony on the broadcast said, well, for the Celtics, that's a win. But on the other end, Cleveland, if they do make that shot, if Cleveland's going fast and you're going slow, it's the odds are in, it favors Cleveland. So I would like to see that, that habit maybe dwindle away, because I do think when you get later on to some of these better teams, they're going to be able to capitalize when you do that. But again, I think the Celtics made the shots that mattered tonight, and in a playoff game, that's what matters more than what you did leading up to those big time shots. So again, if they're going to play good defense and make the ones that matter and that count, then it's not too much to worry about. So I think in the late game execution, it's, again, you've been in one game this whole entire playoff series run that demands late game execution. You'd figure that if, it's tough to get the Celtics into late game execution. So, I think it's not something that as worrisome as we thought, because of how, dominant the Celtics have been in this little postseason, run that they've had. But I don't know. So for game 5, obviously no Kristaps. You'd assume that he's not playing. But bench wise tonight, I thought you saw some great minutes out of Cornette and Pritchard yet again. Hauser had a quiet night, but in terms of the bench, kind of who's the guy off the bench right now that you think you're kind of like, all right, I got the most faith in you?
Pritchard, for sure. He's taken some, going back to game 3, he's taken some really ballsy shots. That logo shot in a tough spot.
Right.
The step back 3 tonight as well. It's just, he's come up really big, and it just makes it even more disappointing how his role diminished last year. But yeah, I think he's just been absolutely spectacular, especially off the bench. If 2 of the 3 main guards, Drew, White, and Pritchard, if 2 of the 3 of them have it going, I don't think we can ask for anything more than that, especially with Tatum and Brown on your team.
Right. I think that, again, I've said this before, the bench, I'm looking for hustle. I'm looking for energy. And I don't know if you've gotten the chance to watch it yet, the Celtics All In, docuseries they're putting out. That's kind of what Pritchard was alluding to. And I love that. That's their mentality, is that, listen, the game's got to change. Something's got to change that when I come into the game. And that is what I've been asking out of Peyton Pritchard for three years now, since his sophomore year, is that when you're in the game, what are you providing? Right? Because, scoring, you're an NBA player. A lot of players in the league can score, especially on the Celtics team. You don't need that much scoring off the bench. What else are you bringing? And Peyton Pritchard over the past 40 games has been bringing this dynamic, pit bull offensive rebound hustle, just pesky, just uber annoying player. If I wasn't a Celtics fan, I would be looking at Peyton Pritchard and I would be cussing him out on the TV because of how frustrating that guy has been for opposing teams. So I think that, and even Luke, you're seeing Luke do it now. Luke's turned into this tip out shot blocker, big body down low. I think that's kind of the next evolution of Hauser's game. He gives you glimpses of it when he hits those backdoor cuts. But again, for me, I agree, Pritchard, but I just want to see energy. When you go back to that 08 Celtics team, you didn't have a lot of scoring off the bench. You had Posey, who was kind of your 3-and-D guy. You had House, who was your sharpshooter. You had PJ Brown, who was just so you had all this, you didn't have much scoring. You didn't need it. You had Allen, you had, Pierce, you had Garnett. You just needed something that those superstars aren't always going to give you. And I think the Celtics have that and then some off the bench, especially when Porzingis comes back and you get to slot Al back to the bench, because I'm not going to lie to you, Al Horford has been terrible. And I will say, Zach, Horford was a guy that I thought was going to be a playoff riser, but he has been a big time disappointment.
Yeah, I would love to see some Tillman in there too. Honestly, it's just taking some of Al's minutes away. I agree. He usually is a playoff riser. He usually shows up in the playoffs. He's been really good for us over the last, I don't even know how long he's been here, 7 years or so, on and off. But yeah, it sucks to see him struggle. But honestly, I thought his defense was pretty good tonight. He got that block on Garland that ended up being a foul, and then they reversed it. But I thought In game 3, his defensive effort was pretty poor, or his defensive play was pretty poor. And I thought he was really good on the defensive end tonight. Obviously, sucks when you're 0-4, 0-5 from 3. And I think he's now 10 for 39, if my math is right, from 3 in the postseason. So, yeah, I mean, he's just got to knock down some open looks, which sucks. But, yeah, I agree. More Tillman minutes. Cobra Kai.
Right, I was right about. I wanted to talk about this comment. Tillman, you're not seeing a lot of. You kind of saw him in those first 2 games at home, but I think this series, and especially against New York, because the last thing you want, and I will say I love Al Horford, man, but his switchability is like kind of gone. He's lost that quick, like that step on defense that he used to have back in, like, honestly, 2022. He had it in like those 2016 years where you were so okay with him switching onto the guard. He doesn't really have that anymore. And Xavier Tillman, in my opinion, is one of the league's best big men switchers, perimeter defenders. And a game against Darius Garland where you're constantly getting high screen and roll actions to get the big man onto Garland, Cornette and Horford, in my opinion, are less valuable than what Tillman brings. So I don't know. Tillman needs more minutes, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's like, it's not even, it's that. And then it's also like, he's old. And so if you can steal an extra 5 or 6 minutes for Horford and play Tillman for 6 minutes a night, that's going to be huge over the, like, because Al needs to be healthy in the Eastern Conference Finals. He needs to be healthy for the finals, especially if KP's health is up in the air.
Right.
He hasn't been great, but he needs to be. If we're playing Xavier Tillman and Luke Cornette as our only 2 bigs in Eastern Conference Finals or a finals game, we're in trouble. So Al needs to be healthy. Hopefully KP will be back by the finals. He looked pretty good in some of the pregame videos that I was watching. He looks to be progressing well. But yeah, if we can steal 6 or 7 more minutes for Al, I got to check his minutes tonight. Cornette's been really good with that, but Horford, he's only at 28 minutes tonight, so that's good.
Right.
Getting 20 minutes out of Cornette is huge because he was really good.
And I don't think us saying more Tillman means less Cornette. Yeah. Because Cornette's been good, and it's no knock on Luke. I just think it's more so that, like, Tillman brings you a defensive aspect that Luke can't, where in situations where, you know, they're attacking a lot of that, like I said, the high pick and roll. Yeah, I think Tillman, 8-10 minutes of Tillman could give the Cleveland Cavaliers 8-10 minutes of poor offensive execution. I think his defensive impact is that solid. And again, like you said, you know, Al, they did a good job tonight. I want to say game 3, Al played like 37 minutes. I'm not positive, but it was in the high 30s. And he is no longer at a stage in his career where he'll be effective once he gets over 30 minutes. He will give you 25 minutes of very solid basketball, but it's like you tell Horford's time's kind of almost there, and this is kind of feels like his last push to the finish line to get that ring. So
I'll just say if we win a title this year, I think he retires.
I tend to agree with you. I don't think and if he does come back, I think there's not much of a role for him.
Udonis Haslam role.
Udonis Haslam role, right? Maybe he finds himself on the front bench coaching.
Yeah, he could be an assistant coach or something. But yeah.
But I do want to talk about a little bit more about Game 5 before we close off here, because it's a closeout game at home, and for me, I think every playoff game the Celtics have played, it's been different. No games have been identical. In a sense of a blowout, but again, that's just box score watching. In the playoffs, there's so much more to it. I want to see a game where everything's clicking, because like you see. Game 5, it happened against Miami where everything offensively was clicking and it was a blowout and you made a statement at home. I want to see that again because, again, a win's a win. I'm not going to complain, but I want to see, I think this team has another step they can get to offensively, where, you know, it just gives you that extra level of cushion. It really wasn't there tonight. Tonight was more of like a Brown and Tatum win us this basketball game, which again, they won it. It's fine. That's a great thing to fall back to, because they're going to win you more games than they lose you. However, you know, I think for me, Game 5, I'm looking to see just like a gut punch to Cleveland, put them away early, get the guys on the bench, get the Garden Rock, and find yourself back to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, I agree. I think just what we talked about earlier with the way that the offense can become stagnant. I don't want them to walk into this game thinking we're at home, it's going to be easy. closeout games are usually the toughest games in a series, and now they have 3 of them, and I would love for them to just take care of it, move on, get the rest that we talked about earlier. But yeah, definitely, I think they've figured it out on the defensive end. Game 2 against Miami was a mess,
Right.
but I've really liked what I've seen defensively from them. As this series has progressed.
And, you know, for me, so I think like there should be no worries about game 5 because from what we've seen this team, but again, it's like post trauma, PTSD with the Boston Celtics is feels like game 5s. I mean, we could go down the list on games we should have won that we lost at home in a big key moment. There's about like 10 of them in the past 3 years, but you know, for me, I think this game 5 is the reassurance win for me, where if they win game 5, I think all of those like, oh no, I'm scared that we're playing at home up 3-1 are out the window, because, you know, you figure Donovan's going to be coming back, and Donovan has really showed you no sign that he's just going to like be okay with getting blown out. The Cleveland Cavaliers haven't shown you that to begin with. They've been fighting hard. They're just really outmatched. So if Boston can manage to win game 5, for me, I think I'm going to feel a lot better. And it kind of feels like all those, you know, PTSD fan experiences could be out the window. I don't know about you, though.
Yeah, I mean, just looking back to the 2022 finals run, game 6 at home against Miami, you punched them in the mouth in Miami in game 5, win by like 25. And then they beat you by like, they were up by 30, I believe, at one point. In a game that's supposed to be like a celebration, we're going back to the finals. They win that game. Every game of the Miami series last year was terrible at home. Even, you know, you go up 2-1 in the NBA Finals against the Warriors, and then it's supposed to be 3-1, and you're 1 win away from the title. And then all of a sudden it's 2-2 going back to Golden State. So just finishing the games where it's like, okay, this is a chance for us to take control of the series, or in this case, finish it out. They've done a good job of that this year, and hopefully it continues forward on Wednesday and then into the Eastern Conference Finals.
Right. I mean, game 5 against Atlanta just last year. That's like the telltale sign for me. You know, you got Atlanta coming for a game 5 with Philly waiting with an hurt Embiid, and they're waiting for you after a sweep, and you have to go fly back to Atlanta and, you know, prolong another 4 days.
Game 5 against Philly last year, too. It's
right.
a 2-2 series. You have a chance to take control. They win game 3, and then you have to have Tatum go ridiculous in game 6 and in ultimately game 7 as well.
Yeah, like I mean, we could spend this. This could have been a 40
every
minute
playoff series that the Celtics have played in the last 6 years. We can name.
Yeah,
or at least it feels like that. We have not had a playoff series.
No doubt. However, the Boston Celtics were able to take a 3-1 series lead over the Cleveland Cavaliers on the road tonight, 109-102. Jason Tatum was tonight's leading scorer, 33 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists for JT in a bounce-back game 4 after a great game 3. And then how about JB tonight, 27 points and 8 rebounds on 60% from the floor and 67 from behind the arc. The Celtics will face off against the Cleveland Cavaliers for a Game 5 back at the T Garden on May 17th. That is this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, guys, after the final buzzer sounds over there. I'm right back here for the Celtics Talk Weekly Post Game Show. And I'm Rob. Next to me is my man, Zach, a.k.a. the Celtics fan page. Till next time, guys, no Celtics.
Play the music.